Ladies and gentlemen, today we gather in a moment of profound reflection and shared humanity. We stand united in the face of injustice, in honor of a name that has come to symbolize a cry for dignity and respect, Traoré. The silence that has enveloped the world in response to this name is not a silence of indifference, but a silence heavy with the weight of grief, anger, and the urgent call for change. Traoré's story is not just a single voice lost to violence or injustice, it is the echo of countless lives silenced too soon, stories cut short by prejudice and neglect. This silence is global because the issues it represents transcend borders, cultures, and nations. It is a silence that demands we listen more closely, not just to words but to the realities faced by so many around the world. We cannot allow this silence to be empty. It must be filled with action, with commitment, with respect for the humanity that binds us all. Respect is not given lightly. It is earned through justice, empathy, and accountability. To respect Traoré is to recognize the value of every life and to reject the systems that seek to diminish it. Let this silence be a powerful reminder that change begins when we refuse to be passive bystanders. It begins when we raise our voices in unison, demanding fairness and equality. It begins when we transform grief into determination and sorrow into solidarity. In honoring Traoré, we honor all those who have suffered in silence. We vow to stand against injustice wherever it exists. We commit to building a future where respect is not just demanded, but universally upheld. Let this global silence be the seed of a louder, stronger call for justice. Let it remind us that respect is not an option, it is a right. And let us move forward together, not in silence, but in the powerful sound of collective action and unwavering respect. Thank you. There is a silence that stretches across nations, a silence that is not empty but heavy with meaning. It is a silence born of collective grief, a sorrow so profound that it unites people from every corner of the globe. This silence carries the weight of countless voices that have been muted, lives that have been cut short, and stories that have gone unheard. It is a silence that speaks louder than words, revealing a deep, shared urgency for justice that cannot be ignored or silenced any longer. This silence reflects the pain of those who have lost loved ones under circumstances clouded by injustice and inequality. It reflects the frustration of communities who have seen patterns of violence and discrimination persist despite promises of change and progress. More than anything, it reveals the universal human longing for dignity, fairness, and respect, values that must not be reserved for some, but must be guaranteed for all. In this silence, there is a powerful reminder that injustice anywhere threatens justice everywhere. The sorrow felt in one place resonates across the world, awakening empathy and solidarity in others who understand that the fight for justice is not confined by geography. It is a shared struggle that demands a collective response. When the world falls silent in respect and contemplation, it is also called upon to listen, to hear not only the tragedy but also the urgent call for change. Yet, the silence cannot remain merely a moment of quiet reflection. It must transform into a catalyst for action. The stillness we feel is a fragile space where hope can take root, but hope alone is not enough. It must be nurtured with commitment, courage, and concrete steps toward addressing the inequalities and systemic problems that have led to this point. This silence demands that we look inward and confront uncomfortable truths about our societies, our systems, and ourselves. Respect is the cornerstone of justice, but it cannot be granted superficially or only in words. True respect arises when individuals and communities recognize the intrinsic value of every human life, irrespective of background, race, or circumstance. It calls for rejecting the biases and prejudices that have long undermined equality and human rights. To demand respect is to demand fairness in how people are treated, in how laws are applied, and in how society values its members. When we honor this silence and the grief it embodies, we are called to examine the structures that allow injustice to persist. It is a call to challenge and dismantle systems that perpetuate discrimination, marginalization, and violence. This is not a task for a few, but a responsibility shared by all, governments, institutions, communities, and individuals alike. We must ask ourselves what actions we are willing to take to ensure that respect is not an aspiration but a reality for everyone. Change is rarely easy or instantaneous. It requires persistent effort and an unwavering refusal to accept the status quo. It begins with refusing to be passive bystanders in the face of injustice. This silence demands that we find our voices and use them boldly, speaking out against inequality and unfairness wherever they exist. It is only when many voices rise together that the tide of injustice can be turned. Solidarity is a powerful force. When people come together across divisions, be they national, racial, or social, they form a collective power that can challenge entrenched systems and bring about meaningful transformation. This silence, though quiet, is a space where solidarity grows. It is the calm before a storm of change, fueled by shared determination and a commitment to uphold human dignity. The grief that this silence carries is a shared burden, but it also holds within it a shared strength. It reminds us of our common humanity and the universal desire for a world where everyone is treated with fairness and kindness. The silence asks us not only to mourn but to act, not only to remember but to build a future that honors the lives that have been lost. As we stand together in this moment of quiet reflection, let us recognize that this silence is not an end but a beginning. It is the starting point of a louder, more persistent call for justice. It is a reminder that respect is not something to be demanded once and forgotten, but something to be continuously upheld and fiercely protected. In honoring this silence, we make a commitment to carry forward the urgency it embodies, to speak up when others are silenced, and to work tirelessly until justice and respect are realities for all. This silence, though heavy with sorrow, is also filled with hope. Hope that through our collective efforts, a more just and respectful world will emerge. There are countless stories like the one we remember today, stories of lives interrupted too soon, of dreams shattered by injustice, and of individuals reduced to statistics rather than honored as human beings. The story we hold in our hearts represents many others who have faced similar fates, whose names we may never hear, but whose experiences are no less painful or significant. It is a story that reflects a pattern far too common in societies around the world, where prejudice and violence continue to claim lives and leave communities in mourning. Each life lost under such circumstances is a profound tragedy, not only for the family and friends left behind, but for all of humanity. These are not isolated incidents, but part of a larger narrative of systemic inequality that persists across generations and borders. The experiences echoed in this story remind us that injustice is rarely random. It is often the result of deeply ingrained biases and structures that allow violence and discrimination to flourish unchecked. Too many lives have been cut short because of prejudices rooted in race, ethnicity, or social status. These biases manifest in many ways, whether through unfair treatment by authorities, unequal access to opportunities, or a lack of accountability when harm is done. Each story, including the one we remember, is a testament to the urgent need to confront these injustices head-on and to work toward creating systems that protect and value every individual equally. This story also speaks to the resilience and strength of those who endure the pain of loss while continuing to fight for justice. Families and communities affected by such tragedies often become powerful voices for change, refusing to let these injustices be forgotten or ignored. Their courage serves as a beacon, inspiring others to recognize the broader implications of these incidents and to stand in solidarity against the forces that perpetuate them. When we acknowledge that this story is not unique, we are compelled to see the broader patterns at play. We must understand that the pain and injustice experienced are shared by many, and that no single incident exists in a vacuum. The recurrence of such tragedies reveals systemic flaws that demand urgent attention and reform. Ignoring these patterns only allows injustice to continue, perpetuating cycles of violence and marginalization. Recognizing that this story represents many also means embracing a collective responsibility. It is not enough to mourn in silence or express sympathy once and then move on. We must actively engage with the underlying causes that lead to such outcomes. This involves questioning and challenging societal norms, policies, and practices that allow prejudice to persist. It requires creating spaces where all voices can be heard and where the dignity of every person is respected and protected. Furthermore, this story calls on us to extend empathy beyond our immediate communities and to understand that injustice anywhere affects us all. When any group or individual is marginalized or harmed, it diminishes the humanity of us all. Solidarity across different communities and nations strengthens the fight for justice and helps build a world where respect and fairness are not privileges but rights guaranteed to everyone. The lives represented by this story remind us of the urgent need for systemic change, changes that go beyond superficial measures or temporary solutions. Real transformation demands deep reflection and sustained action aimed at addressing root causes. It means reforming institutions, promoting equitable policies, and fostering cultures of respect and inclusion. Each life lost is a call to action, a plea for a future where such stories are no longer repeated. This story and the many it represents should inspire us to build societies where every individual is safe, valued, and given the opportunity to thrive without fear of prejudice or violence. It challenges us to become active participants in shaping a world that honors life and human dignity. We must remember that every person's story is unique and valuable, yet when we see how many stories mirror one another in their injustice, we are reminded of our shared humanity and the collective work that remains. The pain felt by one resonates with many, and through this shared grief, a powerful movement for justice can emerge. The strength found in these stories lies not only in the sorrow they carry, but also in the hope they inspire. They remind us that change is possible when people come together to demand it. They remind us that through empathy, solidarity, and unwavering commitment, we can confront and dismantle the prejudices and systems that have caused so much harm. In acknowledging that this story represents many, we affirm our dedication to remembering all those whose voices have been silenced. We honor their lives not just with words, but through meaningful actions that strive for justice, equality, and respect for all. It is through this recognition that we keep their memories alive and ensure that their legacies contribute to a better, more just future for everyone. There is a silence that fills the air, one that carries the weight of sorrow, reflection, and the undeniable call for change. Yet, silence alone cannot bring about justice, nor can it heal the wounds inflicted by injustice and violence. This silence must not remain empty or passive. It must be filled with purposeful action. The quiet moments we share today should serve as the foundation for a movement toward justice, empathy, and accountability, principles that must guide us if we are to create a world where such tragedies no longer occur. Too often, silence has been mistaken for acceptance or indifference, but silence in this context is not resignation. It is a powerful space that demands transformation. It asks us not only to listen, but to respond, to move from contemplation to concrete steps that address the root causes of injustice. When we allow this silence to linger without action, we risk perpetuating the very conditions that have led to pain and loss. Therefore, this silence must be a call to arms, a solemn reminder that words must be matched by deeds. Justice is the cornerstone upon which meaningful change is built. It requires more than symbolic gestures. It demands tangible reforms in systems and institutions that have allowed inequality and discrimination to persist. Justice means holding accountable those responsible for wrongdoing, ensuring that the law applies equally to all, and dismantling policies that create barriers to fairness. It also involves creating pathways for healing and reconciliation for those affected by injustice. Filling the silence with justice means committing to these difficult but necessary steps. Empathy is equally vital in this journey. It is through empathy that we connect with the pain and experiences of others, recognizing their humanity and shared struggles. Empathy fuels compassion and motivates action. It breaks down barriers of misunderstanding and prejudice, allowing us to see beyond our own experiences and stand in solidarity with those who suffer. To fill the silence with empathy is to embrace a perspective that values every individual's dignity and worth, fostering a culture of respect and kindness. Accountability completes this triad. Without it, justice and empathy lose their power. Accountability ensures that promises are kept and that actions align with values. It means being answerable not only for one's personal behavior, but also for the broader systems and policies that affect communities. Accountability requires transparency, honesty, and the courage to confront uncomfortable truths. When we fill the silence with accountability, we reinforce the commitment to change and prevent the cycle of injustice from continuing unchecked. The transformation from silence to action is not easy. It challenges deeply entrenched attitudes and demands sustained effort, but it is necessary. Every moment of silence holds the potential to become a turning point where reflection sparks determination and awareness leads to change. To realize this potential, we must be willing to listen deeply, not just to the words spoken, but to the unspoken cries for justice that reverberate through communities and across generations. Concrete steps toward justice, empathy, and accountability can take many forms. It may begin with education, raising awareness about the histories and experiences that have been overlooked or marginalized. It involves creating spaces where voices that have been silenced can finally be heard and respected. It requires policy reforms that address inequalities in the justice system, economic opportunity, healthcare, and education. It demands that institutions commit to fairness and inclusivity, fostering environments where all people feel safe and valued. Community engagement is also critical. Action must be rooted in the needs and perspectives of those most affected by injustice. Supporting grassroots movements and amplifying marginalized voices ensures that solutions are not imposed from above, but grow organically from lived experiences. This approach strengthens solidarity and empowers individuals to be active agents of change in their own lives and communities. Moreover, filling the silence with action calls on each of us to examine our own roles. It asks us to confront our biases, speak out against injustice when we see it, and support efforts that promote equality. It challenges us to move beyond comfort zones and take risks for what is right. Change is not the responsibility of a few, but a collective endeavor that requires courage, persistence, and hope. As we commit to transforming silence into action, we honor those who have suffered by ensuring their stories lead to progress. We create a legacy that values justice over complacency, empathy over indifference, and accountability over silence. This legacy is not just for today, but for future generations, who deserve to live in a world where respect and fairness are the norm, not the exception. In the end, silence must be a bridge, not a barrier, between the pain of the past and the promise of a better future. When filled with purposeful action, it becomes a powerful force for change. It reminds us that while grief may start with silence, healing begins with our willingness to act. Let us rise to that call and ensure that this silence is never wasted, but always transformed into meaningful progress toward justice, empathy, and accountability. Respect is not something that can be demanded or expected without effort. It is something that must be earned, nurtured, and upheld through justice. To truly honor the memory of those whose lives have been unjustly taken or diminished, we must begin by recognizing the inherent value of every human being. Each person carries a dignity that is inalienable, a worth that transcends background, race, or social standing. Respect, therefore, is rooted in this fundamental recognition and must be reflected in the way we build and maintain our societies. Justice is the means by which respect is made real. Without justice, respect remains an empty ideal, something spoken of but not practiced. True respect demands fairness in all aspects of life, in the way laws are applied, in access to opportunities, in protection from harm, and in the acknowledgement of each person's humanity. When justice prevails, respect flourishes because it confirms that every individual is valued equally and treated with the dignity they deserve. To earn respect through justice is to reject systems that have perpetuated discrimination and inequality. These systems, whether social, political, or economic, have long favored some while marginalizing others, often based on race, ethnicity, or class. Such discrimination undermines the very foundation of respect by creating hierarchies of worth and dehumanizing those deemed less than. Honoring the lives lost to these injustices requires us to actively dismantle these structures and build new ones grounded in equality and fairness. This process begins with an honest reckoning with history and current realities. It calls for acknowledging the ways in which discrimination has shaped societies and understanding the profound impacts it continues to have on individuals and communities. Only through this acknowledgement can we move toward genuine justice. To ignore or minimize these truths is to deny respect to those who have suffered and to perpetuate the cycles of injustice that rob people of their dignity. Respect earned through justice also means ensuring that voices previously silenced are now heard and valued. It requires listening to the experiences of marginalized communities and centering their perspectives in decision-making processes. When people feel seen, heard, and included, respect becomes a lived experience rather than a theoretical concept. This inclusion fosters trust and strengthens the bonds that hold communities together. Moreover, earning respect through justice involves accountability at every level. It means holding individuals and institutions responsible when they violate rights or perpetuate harm. Accountability sends a clear message that injustice will not be tolerated and that respect must be upheld consistently. It also builds confidence in systems meant to protect and serve, reinforcing the idea that everyone deserves fairness and dignity. Justice and respect are deeply interconnected, and one cannot exist without the other. Respect without justice can feel hollow or superficial, while justice without respect fails to recognize the full humanity of those affected. Together, they form the foundation of a society that honors every individual and ensures that no one is devalued or forgotten. The commitment to earning respect through justice extends beyond legal reforms or policy changes. It is a cultural shift that challenges prejudices and promotes empathy, understanding, and solidarity. It requires individuals to examine their own biases and to stand up against discrimination in all its forms. When respect becomes a collective value embraced by society as a whole, it transforms how people relate to one another and creates environments where everyone can thrive. Honoring the lives lost to injustice means more than remembering their names. It means living in a way that reflects their worth and the lessons their stories teach us. It means committing to a future where respect is not conditional or selective, but universal and unwavering. To do so is to build a world where justice is not an abstract ideal, but a daily reality that uplifts and protects all people. This journey toward justice and respect is ongoing and requires vigilance. There will be setbacks and challenges, but the pursuit is essential for creating equitable and compassionate societies. Each step taken to confront discrimination, uphold fairness, and promote dignity moves us closer to the kind of respect that truly honors every life. In the end, respect earned through justice is the highest tribute we can offer to those who have suffered from injustice. It is a promise that their lives mattered, that their stories will not be forgotten, and that we are committed to building a future where such suffering is no longer tolerated. It is through this commitment that respect becomes a powerful force for change, transforming grief into hope and loss into a renewed dedication to human dignity. Change is never easy, and it certainly does not come to those who remain passive in the face of injustice. Real transformation begins with a refusal to accept the status quo, with a collective awakening that compels people to stand up, to speak out, and to demand equality and fairness. When individuals come together, united by a common purpose and a shared sense of justice, their voices become a powerful force that can challenge entrenched systems and spark meaningful change. Too often, the forces that perpetuate inequality rely on complacency and silence. When people choose not to act, whether out of fear, indifference, or a sense of helplessness, they inadvertently allow injustice to persist. Passivity, no matter how unintentional, becomes a form of acceptance that weakens the foundation of fairness and dignity. Therefore, the first step toward genuine transformation is the decision to refuse passivity, to move from being observers to active participants in the pursuit of justice. This refusal to be passive takes many forms. It might be a single voice speaking out against unfair treatment, or a community organizing to demand accountability from those in power. It may involve individuals educating themselves and others about the realities of systemic discrimination, or standing in solidarity with those who are marginalized. Regardless of the form it takes, this refusal to accept injustice quietly signals a commitment to creating a more equitable society. The power of collective action cannot be overstated. When people unite, their combined voices resonate far beyond what any individual could achieve alone. This unity creates pressure that those in positions of authority cannot easily ignore. It demands attention, forces dialogue, and compels change. History is filled with examples of movements that began with small groups of determined individuals who refused to remain silent, ultimately transforming societies and expanding rights for all. Raising voices in unison is not just about protest or demonstration, it is about consistently advocating for fairness in everyday life. It involves holding institutions accountable, challenging discriminatory policies, and demanding reforms that promote justice. It means creating spaces where marginalized voices are heard and respected, and where decisions are made with inclusivity and equity in mind. Demanding equality and fairness requires courage, because it often means confronting deeply rooted prejudices and power structures. It involves standing up against opposition and sometimes facing personal risk or sacrifice. Yet, it is precisely this courage, combined with collective will, that drives progress. When enough people refuse to be passive, they create momentum that is difficult to stop. This momentum leads to tangible changes, whether in laws, policies, or social attitudes, that gradually dismantle systems of oppression. It challenges discrimination in all its forms and promotes a culture where respect and dignity are not privileges for a few, but rights for everyone. Transformation occurs not overnight, but through persistent effort and sustained commitment. Refusing to be passive also means recognizing the importance of solidarity across different communities. Change is most effective when it is inclusive, embracing diverse perspectives and experiences. When people from various backgrounds come together to demand justice, they build a stronger, more resilient movement. This collective refusal to accept injustice strengthens the social fabric and fosters mutual understanding. Moreover, this refusal inspires others to join the cause. Acts of courage and conviction can ignite hope and motivate those who may feel powerless to find their own voices. Change is contagious, and when individuals see others standing firm against injustice, they are more likely to take similar stands. This ripple effect expands the reach and impact of movements for equality and fairness. At the heart of this transformation is a deep belief in the possibility of a better future, a future where everyone is treated with dignity and given equal opportunities to thrive. This belief fuels the refusal to remain passive, turning frustration and grief into action and hope. It challenges us to envision and work toward a society that lives up to its highest ideals. Every moment of silence in the face of injustice is a missed opportunity for change. Conversely, every voice raised, every step taken, and every act of resistance contributes to building a more just world. Change begins when people decide that injustice is unacceptable and that they will no longer be bystanders. This decision to refuse passivity is a powerful declaration of faith in humanity's capacity for progress. It acknowledges that while change may be difficult and slow, it is possible when enough people are willing to act. It reminds us that each individual has a role to play in shaping the future, and that collective action is the key to overcoming injustice. In conclusion, the journey toward equality and fairness is fueled by those who refuse to remain silent or indifferent. Real transformation emerges when people unite, raise their voices, and demand the respect and dignity that every human being deserves. It is through this unwavering commitment to action that societies can move beyond injustice and build a world where fairness is not just an ideal but a lived reality for all. There is a silence that speaks volumes, a silence filled with the weight of loss, sorrow, and the urgent need for change. But silence alone cannot carry the burden of justice. It must be transformed into a collective commitment, a shared responsibility that unites people across nations, cultures, and backgrounds. This silence should not be a quiet endpoint, but rather a powerful catalyst that ignites ongoing solidarity and action to uphold respect and human rights everywhere. Only through such a collective commitment can true justice be realized, and the dignity of every individual protected and honored. When we speak of collective commitment to justice, we are calling upon more than just individual conscience. We are invoking the strength that comes from unity and shared purpose. Justice is not the work of a single person or a single community, but the responsibility of all who believe in fairness, equality, and human dignity. This means that no one can stand apart or remain indifferent when others suffer from injustice. The silence we observe today is a reminder that we must come together, not only in moments of mourning, but in sustained efforts to create a better world. Solidarity is the foundation of this collective commitment. It requires empathy and understanding, the willingness to see the world through the eyes of those who have been marginalized, oppressed, or harmed. When people stand in solidarity, they refuse to allow injustice to be isolated or dismissed as a problem affecting only a few. Instead, they recognize that an injustice against one is an injustice against all. This understanding transforms passive sympathy into active support and drives coordinated action that has the power to challenge systemic wrongs. The silence surrounding tragic events must become a rallying cry that inspires communities to unite across differences. It must encourage collaboration between individuals, organizations, and governments to address the root causes of injustice and build structures that promote respect for human rights. This solidarity is not fleeting or performative. It is an enduring pledge to work together, to listen deeply, and to act decisively in the pursuit of justice. Action is the natural outgrowth of solidarity. It manifests in many ways, from peaceful protests and advocacy campaigns to policy reforms and educational initiatives. Each step taken, no matter how small, contributes to a larger movement toward fairness and equality. These actions hold power because they represent the voices and wills of many, joined together in a common cause. They remind those in power that the people will not remain silent or passive in the face of injustice. A collective commitment to justice also demands accountability. It calls on institutions and leaders to uphold human rights and to be transparent and answerable for their actions. When governments, law enforcement, and other authorities are held to high standards, the promise of justice becomes more than a hopeful ideal. It becomes a tangible reality. Accountability ensures that respect is not just spoken of, but actively enforced and protected. Furthermore, this commitment extends beyond borders. Human rights are universal, and injustice anywhere threatens the security and dignity of people everywhere. The silence we break today must encourage international cooperation and support for those fighting oppression in all its forms. It must inspire a global movement that transcends national interests and embraces a shared humanity. When people across the world stand united in defense of justice, the forces that perpetuate inequality and violence are weakened. Education plays a crucial role in sustaining this collective commitment. By raising awareness about human rights and the history of injustice, societies can cultivate a culture of respect and inclusion. Education empowers individuals with knowledge and critical thinking skills necessary to challenge discrimination and advocate for fairness. It also builds empathy by helping people understand the experiences of others, fostering a deeper sense of connection and shared responsibility. The journey toward justice is neither quick nor easy. It requires patience, perseverance, and the courage to face setbacks and opposition. Yet, it is a journey that must be undertaken collectively, with each person contributing their voice and efforts. The silence that once held grief and reflection must now be filled with determination and hope, a determination to build a world where every person's rights are protected and their dignity upheld. Through collective commitment, communities can transform despair into resilience, division into unity, and injustice into fairness. This transformation honors the memory of those whose lives have been affected by injustice and ensures that their stories inspire lasting change. It sends a clear message that respect for human rights is not negotiable and that the global community stands together in defense of justice. In embracing this commitment, we acknowledge that justice is a continuous process, one that requires vigilance and active participation. It calls on each of us to be not only witnesses to history, but also makers of it. When we act together, grounded in solidarity and shared purpose, we build a foundation strong enough to support true equality and respect. Let the silence that surrounds loss and injustice be the beginning of a powerful movement for change. Let it remind us that while grief may be private, the pursuit of justice is public and collective. In this pursuit, every voice matters, every action counts, and every individual is part of the solution. Through unwavering commitment to justice, united in solidarity and fueled by action, we can create a future where human rights are universally upheld and where respect is the standard for all.